Hi everybody, welcome to November's Fireside Chat. Today we are talking about what we've called rise of the agents, which I think will be quite topical. And I don't know about you, but when I think about agents in a contact center scenario, I guess I think about two things. I think about either sitting on a call on hold for hours. Only to be told when I get to the end of the queue that I'm in the wrong queue and I need to ring back on a different number, or they try and transfer me and I lose the call. Or I don't know what's worse actually out of these scenarios, or I end up talking to what I would call a dumb chatbot that is asking me, that I have to interface with, I have to say the right keywords. It essentially then transfers me to either the right queue, or at some point I get to speak to a human, presumably a human operating a chat interface, right? And hopefully get to the end of my query. But of course, a lot of that is changing now, and what we've seen over the last few years with the rise of generative AI and human-like conversation is that we're starting to see these AI agents now coming into the new modern contact center environment, and of course just the collaboration tools that we use day to day, which I think has really got the opportunity to move what was probably quite a cumbersome and almost replacing the IVR process, right? To be able to provide loads of benefits both for the company that's either trying to sell or provide a service to their customers that are calling in, or of course actually to the customers themselves. So I think some huge benefits that we're seeing around that, and we'll talk about some of these today on the call around inclusivity and accessibility and accuracy and just speed and those things. So I think it's quite exciting. Before we kick off, we'll do the usual. We'll just quickly introduce the panel. A couple of people that have not been on the call for a while, and a couple of new people as well. So I'll just ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off into the topic. So Ken, I'll introduce you first.
Hi, my name is Ken Dickey. I'm the CIO for Leadway Executive Search, which is a global specialist executive search firm based out of the UK.
And Darren, welcome.
Hiya, I'm Darren Everton. I'm the head of technology for London Borough of Hillingdon. We're a local authority over on the west side of London, and we incorporate the area of Heathrow as well.
Alex, hi.
Hello, Alex Taylor, the Group IT Director of AWIN.
And Jazz?
I'm Jazz Bassey, Head of Solution Delivery at Gately. We're a legal and professional services company across the UK.
And for best background of all of us, I think, today. Aidan, hi, welcome.
Aidan Shanahan, Head of IT with Govia Thameslink Railway.
Fantastic. And I'm Bob Quickenden. I'm your host today from Cisilion, so we're predominantly a Microsoft and Cisco managed service provider based out of Southwark Tower in London. So let's kick into the conversation. So I think firstly, before we dive into the questions from the panel, I think it's worth just kind of setting a little bit of a scene of for anyone listening that's kind of going, what are you talking about with these kind of agent things? So if we think about the history of agents, we've always known contact center agents to be the call center representative, if you like, that picks up the call, handles customer interactions within, an organization, whether that's sales or whether that's medical or insurance or whatever that might be. They answer calls, call people sometimes if they're a call center selling things, provide customer support, technical support, all those kind of things. And over time that's evolved, right? So we've kind of had these digital agents, as we've called them, for a while. We see them on websites quite often. I think we have one on ours, and these have generally been rule based. So someone sits and programs a whole set of rules, like we did with IVR in the past, predetermined scripts, decision trees that determine kind of the action that we're going to take based on these kind of programmed instructions, if you like, that can handle tasks and queries. They can be good. They can be as far as enter your policy number, and it can go and look up some data. So it's providing a bit of information, but it's quite limited in the kind of ways that they've always worked. And if we look at kind of where this is evolving to with what we're calling AI agents, then these are take this to another level in the fact that they are leveraging these large language models. So, I'll use ChatGPT as an example because everyone knows what ChatGPT is, but, they're leveraging these large language models and machine learning to provide these really dynamic, context-aware and multilingual interactions with their customers, so they can understand context, they can understand natural language, and they can therefore handle a much wider range of queries and provide personalized responses as well, which I think is a really important factor, because they're not doing it through programming. They can learn from data, they can analyze feedback, they can provide prompts and guidance to the human agent, and they can also hand over much better than a traditional agent can to the human counterpart. So if you're looking at this area of technology, you'll be aware that there's two different sorts of agents being spoken about. Again, just trying to set some context. So we've got what we call autonomous agents, which is quite interesting, where there are certain tasks and certain operations that can be performed autonomously by these agents. That might be things like changing your name on an application, or changing a booking perhaps for a cinema booking or a theatre booking or something relatively simple like that, or just providing information and guidance about what to do in a situation. And then we've got what I think is more common is these kind of semi-autonomous agents, or semi-autonomous agents, if I'm American, where we're talking about still very much involving a human, but assisting a human in those interactions. That might be about making the agent more efficient by gathering information at the beginning about what's happening, assessing a condition, again, depending on what the contact center is there to do, and helping the agent provide a better, more personal experience when needed, or allowing them to focus on higher value tasks. So an example of that might be, if it's an agent for, say, American Express as an example, then manually speaking to somebody about upgrading their Amex from gold to platinum, they might see that as more of a higher priority for the business than maybe allowing someone to change their address or something like that, which maybe the autonomous agent could deal for them. So lots of cases, but I think, as again with any form of introducing AI into a platform, there are of course always discussions to have and concerns around accuracy, around are we replacing humans, which is something that comes up a lot whenever the word AI comes in. There's obviously ethical concerns around and privacy concerns around where is that data being stored, and I guess that's kind of part of the contact center function. Generally, calls are recorded for quality and training purposes and things like that. But I think there's also a huge amount of benefits that this technology can give, and we're seeing huge advancements in this space at the moment. And we thought it was a really good topic to talk about. So you've heard me waffle on and hopefully introduce some of the context about that. But I think one of the areas that relies very heavily on interaction with residents is, of course, public sector. So Darren, welcome. Thank you for joining the panel today. And I wonder if you just want to kick us off with some of your thoughts and observations.
Yeah, I guess for local authorities, with funding sort of reductions and so on, and challenges in the sector, actually channel shift and transformation has been something which has been on all councils' programmes for a long time, and that's very much been around moving resident contact away from the higher cost channels and moving them onto a channel where you can get a good experience, but it's a lower overall cost to the authority. And generally that's been around services delivered via the websites, but actually getting people to the right place in the websites is really challenging, just because of the sheer number of different services which local authorities provide. And actually understanding what the top services are, augmenting the search function, and inevitably ending up with some form of chatbot has been previously the way that that's been achieved. But as Rob says, the chatbot functionality up until now has been quite woeful because it's depended upon a lot of upfront programming of sort of decision trees and trying to understand the types of things that a resident would type in to try and get to a particular journey. So the whole chatbot area is been on a complete evolutionary journey, and as each sort of iteration of different Gen AI functionality comes out, we're starting to see that that functionality is improving and providing more capabilities. And I think to begin with, just actually understanding what the resident has been inputting and taking advantage of like natural language processing to try and understand what the ask is was really the first part of the evolution. But really now we're starting to see how we can, once we understand what the ask is, actually how we match that then against some pertinent information which is really relevant. So moving beyond being that signposting to actually trying to understand how we can actually answer the question straight away without any other sort of signposting going on. So that's sort of a really exciting area, and it's, you know, getting the large language models to actually train on our data, on our policy information, on our processes and procedures. You know, these are all things that we can start feeding into these models to really start helping these chatbots get better at doing that sort of performing that delivery of the answer in the first attempt. So I guess chatbots is really an interesting area where there's been improvement. But I think for me, the area which I see the sort of the next evolution step coming in is actually how we can plug that into the whole voice channel itself. Obviously, you know, we can't eliminate a contact center completely because, you know, we will have residents that have inquiries which are out of the bounds of information that we're providing on the website, but also you know, for accessibility reasons, you know, some people might not be able to access the web, and we still need to provide an access channel for people in that way. And to be honest, you know, the best channel for you to access the council should be the channel which is most convenient for you in getting your inquiry resolved, and put aside the, you know, whether it's the least cost channel for us as an authority. To be honest, yeah, as I said, you know, it needs to be what's most convenient for you, and sometimes that will be the voice channel. But how can we provide residents with a good experience leveraging AI facilities before you actually get to speak to a person? And I think from that area, you know, advances that we've seen in speech to text conversion, putting that through an AI engine, generating the result, and then doing the speech text to speech on the output and on the output side, providing that back to a resident, is really where the benefits could be moving forward. I think there's still a lot of challenges there. If you've seen with, you know, like ChatGPT, sometimes when you ask it something, there can be a delay and it takes a while to build up a full answer. And of course, if you're on the other end of a phone actually waiting for some response, those types of delays are actually really emphasized. You really notice it on the speech channel versus when you're actually doing something on the screen. So that's an area. I've seen improvements in that in sort of some proof of concepts that we've been involved in recently. I've seen real benefits and improvements in that area just in the last 2 months. But it is still an area, I think, before that will become prime time, we need to make some improvements in that area. But it's not necessarily all about speed of processing. If you've looked at Microsoft's Copilot mobile app that now gives you the ability to speak to an assistant in quite a natural way. You'll notice there's not an awful lot of delays in answers that you get, and I think there's some very clever tricks which people are playing now in order to how you can fill some of those gaps with, you know, naturally sounding things, the way humans fill gaps when we're buying ourselves a bit of time to think about a response or provide an answer. You know, we have these sort of the ums and the ahs and the little filler words which goes in, and actually some of those fillers, they serve a purpose for buying a bit of extra time, but they're also providing quite a naturally sounding conversation as well to make things flow better. So I think, yeah, definitely it's a really exciting area. I think what we're doing with chatbots on the web is just scratching the surface at the moment, and what we could do in the contact center I can see as the real next big part of the evolutionary journey.
That's really interesting, Dan, actually, because I think you've taken that very much from the website stuff, and I guess in your line, it's very common, right, for that interaction to come via the web. So certainly myself, I live in London Borough of Bromley. I quite often will go on there to look at things like, if I've got some big recycling to do, do I need to go down to the refuse centre? Can I get it collected? How does that kind of work? Can I book doorstep deliveries? Those kind of things. So I do tend to go on there to navigate services, and yeah, I won't lie and say it's really simple. It's always changing, and it's hard to know where to navigate. And I think that interaction point you talk about there is really powerful. If you can actually eliminate don't even point me at a place to go, which is kind of what happens today. I can put a query in, it will point me at a website and take me there, but actually to have that whole interaction dealt with on the website is really powerful. And I think as you touched on then, I think that next evolution, which is kind of the bit I'm really excited about actually, is the contact center piece, right? And I guess for you probably operate multiple contact centers, I imagine, for different parts of the council, and where both chat-based agents, and it's a really interesting point you made about the evolution of voice into that, where we could actually be in a situation very soon where customers are calling through voice, and they're actually speaking to an agent through natural language but over voice. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, some of that already is here. So our contact center solution we're using at the moment is using natural language processing to understand where a resident has got needs to go, in place of a traditional IVR, which would say press 1 for this department, press 2 for that department. And the benefit of that as well, again, we touched a little bit upon earlier on the intro, is around multi-languages. So as a council, we have residents with a wide range of language, and English isn't the first language for a lot of people, and actually being able to again provide services for residents in a method which is convenient to them, actually just helps if you can understand what a person is asking for and where they need to go, and that's half the battle then, to actually providing them with the answer that they need. And yeah, the sort of natural language processing engines do provide that, but yeah, we want to go beyond that sort of understanding where people want to go, and actually seeing how far we can push the technology to actually fulfill those requests.
I love that. And Ken, we were talking just before we started actually about inclusion and accessibility. Did you want to add to some of the comments that Darren made there?
So as Darren said, their language is one thing, but so we've been working with organisations that primarily Purple Tuesday, where we're talking about systems being accessible. Now, actually, this in the role that we have with executive search, it's slightly less pertinent to dealing with the external client-facing side of pieces, but internally as well, it's quite a powerful piece. But it's about how these AI agents can ask a question of is there anything that can help with the accessibility, and if you're dyslexic or if you have certain neurodiversity kind of issues that you want to be addressed, that the bots can actually respond in a way that is very natural. So it will open up double spacing, etc. And again, it's about empowering people to engage with the systems, which you can't. And I'm a massive advocate for human beings involved in lots of areas, but this is a piece where I feel that you start to see some real gains in the AI tooling being real time, live, being able to deal with a situation. Somebody says I'm dyslexic, the text spacing becomes different. Is it the right sort of text spacing? Does it need to be all capitalized, etc.? And actually the AI can ask the questions around doing that, and it's all in real time. It can switch between languages. It can start reading out as opposed to typing out on the display. There's various different pieces where the interaction between the agent and the individual becomes richer. I still have we've been dabbling with the agents internally for our support methods, etc. And being a commercial organization, everything needs to be more from less, quicker, faster, more accurate. And the problem we find is the minute we put any of these AI agents in between our human resources and the coalface, we kind of break those rules. It's not faster, it's not more efficient, and people get really frustrated with it. And it doesn't matter how good it is at the moment, we're still seeing people struggle with the whole, why can't I just get a mouse? That's all I want. Why can't the support desk just turn up with a mouse? Why am I having to ask this stupid robot why I need the mouse, or whatever it is? And it's a case of there is these pieces where that's probably on us. It's not necessarily the AI, obviously. It's more about how we teach these things, but there are real elements of pros and cons, and I'm kind of looking into the pros more than the cons. I think the language piece for us as well is really special because we're a global firm. We have people in Asia, we have people in Europe, we have lots of accessibility components that this helps us address. Certainly from, say, training materials, etc. You can be going through the AI bots and looking for learning and development materials, but you might want it in Cantonese. And actually then we've got other products that we use where the training materials then change into Cantonese and you can't tell, and it's a video avatar and you can interact with it. It's very, very clever. And so that these bots are becoming accepted, and I think that's the other part is people have got used to the frustration around hitting numbers and the old IVR systems are going press 1, press 2. Actually people are starting to get comfortable having interactions with these systems because they've become less robotic and more natural, and that encourages people to behave in different ways. So I think what Darren's doing just with the council just makes key services just much more accessible, and that's what you want in the end of the day, right? So
and it's an interesting point you make about them becoming more accessible, because as I touched on the beginning, it's historic, isn't it, how poor the experience has been, and it has always really been just about trying to delay the queue a little bit and trying to deal with some simple things. If you can push someone off to a website and stop them being in the queue, then it felt like that was kind of the goal a lot of the time. I think it's really interesting your point about acceptance, and more people just naturally being okay with that interaction rather than seeing it as a frustration. And I guess that will vary as well by by age demographic, by location, by sector as well.
But I think that's a really, just to kind of pick that one up, and I'm going to, my mother-in-law won't be listening, so but I hope she won't mind me referencing this, but it's really interesting just seeing how in her home now she's got used to having an Alexa and she's quite comfortable saying play Radio 2, etc., and actually when it then comes into actually calling customer services or the council or whatever, she is now far more au fait with the fact that the voice at the other end is nowhere near as robotic as it was, but it is still a machine. But she's kind of got comfortable with the fact that I'll just ask it a question and I'll persevere with it because eventually I'll get there. Whereas the frustration of press a 1, press a 2, and it's not the person you want to talk to. And that's a completely different age demographic. And again, it's about that accessibility, acceptance, and it's fascinating how the AI stuff is powering that more than the youngsters will always accept talking to kind of an AI piece, but actually making services. And again, in Darren's case, when you're dealing with maybe more vulnerable groups or etc., the fact that the people can feel comfortable and get access to pieces, that's a really powerful and really useful part of the AI journey.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, Jazz, can I, you're obviously in the legal sector, right? So where do you, have you got any kind of views on this? Have you got any experience of this internally? Are you reviewing this kind of stuff? What do you think?
Not actively reviewing it. We're looking at a variety of solutions which may lead into us introducing these kind of things, not necessarily to our clients. We've got an advisory piece to deliver from a human there. But there's always opportunities when it comes to efficiency or improving an internal process, maybe. I disagree a little bit with what Ken was saying about the adoption piece. I think you're still going to have this generational piece. As humans, we don't need, we're adverse to change. Even those that are delivering change are not the most receptive of having it enforced on them. So we've got to find the right balance between delivering these services to those who are accepting and welcome of it, and delivers a benefit to the organisation and the individuals involved. But there aren't going to be individuals which aren't going to interact well with this, whether it be those with conditions that aren't well aligned with working with an automated AI bot like this, or those where the training could lead to biases in the responses that are being provided, and the interaction is going down a channel or down a route that isn't aligned with where that user needs to go. So there still needs to be a multi-channel approach of delivering a human interaction as well as the agent-based services. But yeah, from a sector, I think the legal sector is probably going to be receptive in certain areas in the more transactional type activity, and that's where it will deliver the efficiency gains in both the productivity piece being faster and the quality being more consistent, but also with the cost there. But I think there are going to be areas that are going to be more receptive to this, and where it will deliver wins quicker. So this is probably one of the talks that I'll probably speak the least on. But my personal opinion, I think there's still a way to go here before these agents can deliver what's required, and that there is also going to be that concern, that risk about deepfakes as well. So how do you determine, as we introduce more voice-based agents, but between that and maybe a voice-based phishing scam?
Yeah, interesting one on your side specifically. How do we feel? Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. As I said, I think that sector is definitely interesting. I think Ken, what you talked about with the everyone has one of these voice things at their home. I think it's the same. I mean, I have the same. Speaking about mums and mother-in-laws, we could probably have a whole session on the technology with our in-laws. That would probably be maybe we'll do that for Christmas. That'll be a slightly light-hearted show. But I think the other aspect, I think, which we've not covered in depth, which I think is interesting in this space, is AI is being used to assist the human, right? So by that I mean that the human agent. So some of the examples of we've talked about using it for actually helping someone do a task, so book an appointment, checking the availability and going through and booking things, for example, or helping with language or etc. But I think also if you think of it from, say, a sales or a service perspective, and Aidan, I'll probably pick on you for this one and see what your thoughts are. But I see another really big opportunity for actually assisting the agent. So through training, through just guidance. I think particularly if it's a conversation where someone's complaining about something, and you're actually being able to detect tone, suggest ways in which, almost coach the agent on how they may respond based on the tone of the person that they're speaking to, and even then to pick back up on the interaction after a call. So let's say a call happens and somebody calls back, then actually the fact that you've got not only the transcription, which is quite common, calls are recorded and things all the time, but the fact that we've actually got the ability to reason over the information, to have sentiment analysis on the information, even suggest remediative tasks that could happen based on the AI agent. So Aidan, I was just interested in your kind of thought from your sort of background in industry.
Well, I think I probably agree with bits of Ken and bits of Jazz. Really, it's. I think inherently, from our perspective, you've got to be able to satisfy the needs and the interaction from your customer. It can't just be a financial decision. Yeah. I think it's the lovely seesaw of customer service versus what's your cost for running it. And whilst the cost for running it is obviously a key concern, I can't get away from the fact that generally age-defined demographics prefer different methods of communication because they're more familiar with it. Yes, it's been great to see sort of some of the, I suppose, uptake of certain demographics, but you've got some sort of segments entirely who would prefer to text someone rather than actually speak to someone at all, versus the ones at the opposite end of the spectrum who would like a voice, and they'd like a human voice, and they don't like an IVR tree because they've been pushed through them for years. So they're very angry by the time they get to the end of the IVR tree, which doesn't really help when they're calling up to complain about something because you haven't delivered the service you said you were going to do.
You just made them more angry.
So I'm really, I suppose it's, for me, it's a real mixed bag in that I think you need to have all the mechanisms there to sort of support the choice of in our case, the customer or passenger, really. I suppose we're a bit behind where some of the other industries would have been with regards to sort of deploying things. We're more sort of making the way into sort of supporting more of the omni-channel process now. Mainly that's been some of the sort of change of existing contract partners behind the scenes and things like that, which have taken a more longer tender process to go through to a point and then migrate. But now we've got a good foundation in place. Then we are looking at, I suppose, how we expand our offering and how we can optimize some of that. But I do think it's also the voice of the customer has to be heard. It's if they want to talk to you on a phone and they want to talk to a human straight away, yes, there's a cost to that, but it's the CFO and the financial is an interesting balance, I think, and it's always got to be sort of, well, yeah, we could do that, but is that what our customers actually want?
And what about on the point of, so if we kind of go, look, people want to talk to a person, right? Which I think is, and you're kind of alluded to, I think, Jazz as well. But what about the assisting the assistant side? So, using AI to analyze and almost provide, it can look up information far quicker than a human can. Do you see a benefit of that side?
I see a huge benefit with that side. It's kind of like, again, it's something we'd probably be more looking at, and even if it's not the customer facing side of things, even if you just look at the internal side of things where we support 8,000 odd staff, it's kind of like from that perspective, you kind of go, how are we looking at doing our things, and could we be trialing something or tooling something there where, again, it's like, oh, I need a mouse or a keyboard, or my monitor's broken or my laptop's broken. You kind of go, could we look at shifting from a very sort of defined flow process where someone has to fill in a form, raise an incident, and then do that, to sort of a natural language query? I think that's probably the more stuff we're looking at sort of internally at the moment. But I think from a customer facing agent, anything you can do to better improve their context for the customer who's calling or texting or chatting with them, then the more information they have, the easier it is at their fingertips, the faster they can sort of answer that person's query. That's great for the person, but it's also great for the business because then obviously the call handling sort of speed goes up, really.
Yeah, which I guess is kind of where you end up with your soft versus hard costs, isn't it? But you've got better satisfaction. I guess you've got, like you touched earlier about, you do have people interacting, I guess, with, SMS and social and those kind of things as well. So so it's the blend, isn't it? I think it's kind of it feels like, again, it's that ethos of, loads of value, but not everywhere, but not for everyone. It's almost the same. It feels like the same approach, right?
I think it has to fit with your business and kind of who your customers are. Because I mean, the other thing as well is don't forget, it's how many customer touch points have now changed, because you kind of go, well, okay, if people would have generally bought from a ticket office that have spoken to someone, well, now generally people will buy from an app or a TVM, so they're less likely to speak to a staff member on a concourse, or they may speak to a staff member on board when their ticket's checked. It's a very different thing to sort of suddenly say the call center generally is for inquiries or pre-booked accessibility travel or things like that, and dealing with issues which have occurred through our journeys. So it tends to be more the sort of, I suppose, we're trying to respond and fix something for someone rather than it being a proactive thing almost. So it's a very different vertical sort of sales, I suppose. It's and I think that's part of it, really, is that you're dealing with someone who's possibly slightly angry at you already. So
I think that's another point as well. I think one of the interesting cases I was talking to someone about the other day was actually that helping the agent from a well-being perspective, right? So we do have, I mean, I did it for a few years. Aidan, you'll probably remember, I worked on a support desk at an IT company many years ago when I first started, and you could get totally drained, right, by those complaint calls of things that had gone wrong and broken and networks not working or whatever else it was, and it was quite, could be quite depressing, on a gloomy Friday afternoon. And actually, you think about some of that and the ability to also feed back to supervisors, right? To say, look, this person's just had an absolute grilling by 4 different people, like they need a break, like literally their well-being is not in a good state. So I think, there's also aspects of how we can use this technology and sentiment to actually provide better well-being experiences to the humans, right? That are, sometimes hidden away from this world, right? And quite often, I think consumers, customers, whatever, don't necessarily necessarily think about the human impact of how they speak to people. Right? I'm sure we've all been on those kind of calls before. Alex, don't want to leave you to last, but you work in a really interesting market as well. So I was kind of keen on your, what you've heard today and kind of anything you wanted to add to
I think again, like Aidan, it's a little bit of everything, or from everyone rather. We've had I'd say an uptick in interest in Copilot agents internally, with different departments expressing an interest to understand it and see what it offers. The InfoSec team are quite keen to look at how it can support RFP processes and automate a lot of that. And it comes in actually a lot better priced than actually existing systems that we have that in theory does the same sort of thing. So that's quite a shocker for me. We've also had the marketing team quite interested. I mean, I think we are relatively all in the Microsoft stack in terms of where our data sits. So from our perspective, it in theory quite easy to hook the agent up to where our data sits. And that's going to be the key. I've just been chatting, ironically, to our SharePoint agent whilst this conversation was going on, just to see it's a relatively new thing that's lit up in our tenant. And it actually found the information that I was asking for. I just asked it where our VAT numbers were, or what was the VAT numbers for the companies, and it found them. I could have just used the regular search to do that, but the search would have just taken me to the page and I'd still have to discover the data. So it takes a couple of steps away from that. However, from our perspective, we are testing internally as well from our own support bot perspective, but I'm only looking at it at this stage as a proof of concept. It only takes one user to get frustrated with the result you get. We want it to ensure that if you don't get the answer that you're looking for, that the bot can then automatically raise a ticket on your behalf with the data that you've already chatted about inside it. So there's the context that the support agent picks it up and can get the job done faster. If there are ways and that we can automate some of those processes so it can almost act like a support agent and actually carry out the tasks, not just say this is what the answer is, but okay, I need to reset password might be a bad thing, but those sorts of scenarios where, again, we are a global business with global workforce, but we are not a global IT team. We're based out of the UK and Germany, pretty much supporting European hours. So out of hours, having the ability to have a bot that acts like me or acts like the team that can at least keep the user satisfied and raise the ticket on their behalf potentially with the right elements and fields put in means that the support team should be able to get to that and resolve that issue quicker when they come online the next day. So there are definitely elements there. Same for other teams, but it's making sure that, again, all of your other back-end systems are hooked up and connectable as well. Just listening to Jazz and Ken speak, I was thinking, okay, I can see ways that we could potentially hook it into our main platform for our customers, but you've got to make sure that the underlying technology on that side can also talk to that thing over there as well. And it might not be able to, or the system that does might not be as efficient as some of the other language models that are there. So it's definitely come a long way to where I saw it, 4 or 5 years ago when Microsoft were trying to push their Azure agents at the time. But I think, yeah, we're treating it as a proof of concept. If it does expose that the data is incorrect, it's at least a good opportunity to say, look, this can provide benefits, but we've got to sort out our data. User permissions on the data as well. If I don't have access to the site that tells you the tax numbers, it's not going to tell me that. Whether I think that that's data that should be hidden behind, if I don't have access, I don't know. So I've then got to still pick up the phone and speak to the person or message the person on Teams to find the same information out. And ironically, using the VAT numbers is something that I do quite often when I'm checking invoices or have to fill things in. And I hate having to refer back and ask the same person time and time again, or think, oh, I think it's on our SharePoint somewhere. So the fact that I can, again, I don't have to do it from our SharePoint. I can just, and I tested it from Copilot itself inside Teams, it surfaced the same information. So that's where it suddenly comes a eureka moment. Oh, I can use it to do things like that. And I was then having a continual conversation, asking about other entities without having to, restart the flow. So I think there are definitely benefits there. But it's, from our perspective, it's still a proof of concept to make sure that it's easy to use and create as well. So again, there's not more emphasis put on IT to support these things.
So yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting other case as well. And I've just looked at the time. Actually, we've covered so much ground. I think your point's a really interesting one, slightly different as well. But I think that point of almost using those, using that agent support across, as you say, like the 365 world, for example, in that, as well as across kind of the customer interaction space. And I think that's almost that blur between, as we touched at the very beginning about, autonomous versus semi-autonomous. And I think that ability, as you say, to, using your example of IT support, and Aidan, you touched on that as well, but, providing some guidance, which a chatbot could do in traditional sense, but then pointing someone at a form when it can't help to go and log a ticket is a pain, right? Because you could have just gone there in the first place. Whereas I think what you're talking about there is interesting, of going that actually you've got all the information that person needs. The fact that you can't solve the problem straight away, if you could log a ticket on their behalf for them, I can't solve this today, I don't have the answer, I can't do it. Would you like me to log a ticket and someone will deal with it? Even that is a big mile step away from, I now haven't got to go back to a form.
Yeah.
So I think that's
and it can, we've used other slightly Microsoft automation bits, and it can do that. And it starts to bring everything together, and it starts to make it a more seamless approach. And I don't know whether it would be used massively by our users, but it just needs one user in the US or Malaysia or Sydney to have a problem and have not it answered, but it raises the ticket on their behalf. They get the automated response saying that your ticket's been logged. The team picks it up the next day. It's dealt with, and the user didn't have to remember to do the same thing again tomorrow. Yeah. So that friction has been greatly reduced.
I just want to quickly jump in here before we go, because Aidan started this, and it's been a thought in my head for a little while. But one of the things that Alex is talking to there, and I think it's a big piece here that the AI agent has opened up for everybody, is the barrier to entry has dropped massively. And that's the difference. You used to look at these systems and go, what is the singular use case? It's super expensive. We're going to have this workflow and it's going to address that. We've talked on here about so many different random things. And we're all talking about the same kind of fundamental, which is this AI bot that we can throw at literally anything. And as Aidan mentioned, it's the argument between the CFO and the COO, Actually, the CFO's going, what do you mean you can service like 6,000 requests for about 10 grand or whatever the numbers are? But it's all of a sudden it becomes cost effective as well. It's no longer pie in the sky. It's all like, wait a minute, this is actually, it's not, there isn't a massive technical debt and technical complexity in the way that traditionally it would have been. You also have this lower cost entry into it. And actually, you can also answer 1,001 questions, not one specific thing. So you're looking for what gives me the most return on investment. And I think that's where this is reshaping the landscape, because you all of a sudden got people coming like Alex going, I can provide better support to Sydney, even though my support team is in the UK. And it means that we've just shortened down the SLA from 24 hours to they can pick it up in the middle of the night. And actually, we can be fixing it. And by the time they've woken up, it's now a 12-hour SLA, And there's very little cost in the big scheme of things to do that. You're not hiring people, buying big systems, etc. And I think this is that barrier to entry, and then also what you can use it for. it's exponential. I mean, it's just phenomenal what we can do with this stuff.
I mean, but yeah, phenomenal. You've just done my wrap up. Brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant. No, but you're right. I think we've covered so many different areas, and I think, you know, we could, you know, we've scratched the surface of this stuff, and I think it just kind of shows that evolution. You know, we've talked about those kind of efficiencies across the board, right? So efficiencies from the customer perspective, or whether that is in whatever sector that is. We've talked about the efficiency actually with the agents themselves. So how do we help them, you know, focus on the right things, view up their resources in the right place, handle some of the repetitive stuff, right, easier. You know, you can even imagine that point of actually, you know, having the agent initiate the AI agent, right? So it's an agent to support the agent that then goes and does some of those things in the background. We've talked about cost, you know, from a, you know, yes, from the labor side of, you know, there's always that play to the point of the CFO CEO conversation, but I think in the right places, I think that low cost to entry is massive, Ken, that you touched on. I think that's really important, to the ability to go and do a pilot at low cost and try these things out, which, you know, a couple of you have talked about how you're doing those things, is something that couldn't have been done, you know, 5 years ago, right? That would have been huge investment at the time to prove whether something was worth it. And I think, you know, again, I think, you know, 24/7 operations, yes, you know, brilliant. But I think that accessibility, inclusivity perspective as well, is massive, you know, and I think that's kind of definitely one of the areas that I think across, you know, particularly, you know, public services everywhere, and I mean, anywhere, any global organization as well, is going to see huge benefits of those things. But that's where the impact on cost comes in as well, where you're not necessarily having to hire, you know, lots of multi-language or open centers in different countries just to deal with, I say just, that sounds wrong, but to deal with, you know, every possible location. So I think that's a really interesting one. And again, you know, how you're passing that information back into the business as well. If you're having a conversation that's, you know, not in your native language, and then you need to go and have a conversation, or someone else needs to pick that up to analyze it, so that's an analyst needs to pick that conversation up afterwards, then actually the fact that that is available in any language is really important as well. Listen, team, fantastic sets of conversations. I've not even checked the chat to see whether we've got any chat. Actually, no questions today, which is good. Excellent. I don't know if anyone got any closing remarks, but I think that's been really insightful. I really thank all of you for your thoughts on that. I've certainly got some new inspirations, and I hope you have all too, from the conversations we've had with each other. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to all our listeners, live and on catch up, and we'll see you next month for a talk about our mother-in-laws, by the sounds of it.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Bye.